Well, we've got Dylan with us from Florida. Dylan says, I have questions about the validity of the New Testament. And trust me, Dylan, you should have questions. What you got?
Well, first of all, I'm stoked to be talking to you guys. Long-time listener, first-time caller type. And I'm also out here playing with my daughter, so if I have to go suddenly, that's why. I'm sorry. But, yeah, so
No
I
worries.
was raised Southern Baptist, so that's already a fun one. Like, since I was really small, like, Southern Baptist, baptized when I was 5, and I was afraid to go to hell when I was 6. You know what I mean? Like, just the scariest thing. But then, you know, as time went on and, you know, I lived life and became an adult, I just became, you know, much more of liberal mindset when it comes to a lot of different things politically and biblically. But I still, like, found myself praying, even recently, you know, found myself praying and, like, really leaning on that kind of spirituality and, like, that aspect of it. And I've read the Bible a couple of times. I was homeschooled for a year or two in middle school, and my mom made me read the Bible front to back as one of my classes, and that was actually one of the more enjoyable things because it was really fun to read all this stuff. But after watching, you know, Deconstruction Zone and things like that recently, I learned so much more. So thank you, Justin, for that. Learning so much more about all kinds of different things, and I'm just like, I find myself struggling to understand what the validity, if there is any, of the New Testament at all. You know, even if it's separate from the Old Testament. And I hear things like, you know, 2 Samuel, Deuteronomy, like, just, there's just so much. And I work at a bookstore, so every time we get a Bible and I flip open to something random, and it's always atrocious. So now that I've been hearing all this stuff. So I'm just, like, wondering, like, is there any validity to any of it separately from them being related to each other? Does that make sense?
Well, let me ask you a question. If the New Testament will say tells a lie about the Hebrew scriptures, should we trust the New Testament still, or should we throw it out?
I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. Like, it's really hard to understand. Like, because we say that, like, Jesus was a false prophet, but does that negate pretty much everything Jesus said and did, you know?
Well, follow me here. If the New Testament says things that are untrue, then we have to make at least one concession, right? We have to concede that the New Testament is not inerrant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that the Bible needs to be inerrant? Is that a critical situation for you?
It kind of objectively isn't. So, like, that is immediately a struggle, you know?
Okay, so the Old Testament and the New Testament could contradict each other and it wouldn't matter to you?
Well, it does matter. That's kind of where I'm at right now, but it's just like
Okay.
the consistent, like, one does invalidate the other. And
I agree.
between the Old Testament and Jesus and, like, things like that, it's just a really difficult thing for me because right now I'm at a point where I'm just like, I do believe, or I'm struggling. Sorry, I'm talking on the phone, babe. It's where, like, the spirituality part of it is really hard to let go of, you know, because, like, there's so much that I've leaned on for
you don't know the other. Yeah, you don't know the other side. You have no idea what that other side's like. Exactly. I get it.
So I guess the only thing I would do is I would
go ahead. Yeah.
I would maybe push on you from just a logical standpoint on how much stuff in the New Testament has to be wrong, how many lies have to be told before you can look at it and just say, maybe this book is not true. Maybe we don't need this thing. What do you think that number is?
I mean, logically, it has to be just one lie, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it should just be one lie, right? So do you think we can find one lie in it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. At least one.
Okay.
Accuracy,
yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's lots of them.
we don't even have to. So we can skip that step. Do we have one in mind? Justin's really good at picking them.
So, like, one of my favorites, right? Have you read the book of Hosea?
Not recently, but yeah, in the past.
Yeah, there's a famous passage in chapter 11 says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. And the more that I called them, the more they went from me, and they kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols. So this is a pretty easy little passage here. Let me ask you, what is the author intending to say?
Could you read it one more time for me?
Yep. It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more that I called them, the more that they went from me, and they kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols.
It's saying that he's calling his people to him, but they are not. They're still sacrificing to idols. They're not. They're disobeying.
This should remind you of what event in the Old Testament? Do you know?
Not right off, no.
This is from the Exodus, right? It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him. That's a quote from Exodus chapter 4, when God says that Israel is my firstborn child, and he's releasing them from captivity in Egypt, right? I think 4:22. It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son, because that's what happened. The firstborn son of Yahweh was called out of Egypt. And then what they do, since they got out, they started sacrificing to the idols, right? They got the episode of the golden calf and whatnot. So this is a retelling of history, is it not?
It is, yeah. And then Moses made them drink the ashes.
Got it. Right. Now, let me ask you, in verses 1 and 2, when it says when Israel was a child, so on and so forth, is that a prophecy or is that history?
It seems more like history than a prophecy.
Yeah, it is history. Yeah. In fact, it's laying the groundwork for the prophecy that's going to come starting in chapter 11, verse 5, right? It's giving the reason why they're about to be punished, right? So it's saying, this is the stuff you did back here, and coming to present, now this is why I have to punish you in the future. So this is a history that's giving justification for punishment. The problem is that when we go to Matthew chapter 2, I believe verses 14 through 16, says, Joseph got up and took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, out of Egypt I have called my son. Well, that's just a bald-faced lie. Hosea 11 is not giving a prophecy about the Messiah coming out of Egypt. Not even close to that.
So why even say that? So is it,
because
are they just trying to juxtapose?
They had theological motivations.
Right. So are you familiar with the sharpshooter fallacy? I know JMike is.
I'm not, no.
So, yeah. So basically you start at the conclusion, right? Like you have an arrow in a tree, and then you draw a target around the arrow and say, look, I made a bullseye.
I got it.
Yeah.
Which is the only way that I play darts, by the way.
So the New Testament authors are starting with the conclusion that Jesus is the Messiah predicted in the Old Testament. So what do? They go back into the Hebrew scriptures and they're like, what can I find here? Can I find anything that sounds anything like this Jesus character? And then they go in there and they say, oh, these words look similar. We're just going to call it a prophecy.
Isaiah 53. That's not how prophecy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you look at the prophecies that he's fulfilled, even what's that?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, what do you think the motivation was for them to wrap the bullseye around Jesus specifically at the time? Like what?
Well, to me, they weren't willing to get rid of their belief system.
Yeah, let me ask Justin. Like, when you say that, or when we agree on the kind of motivation, you're not saying that, look, there's some dishonesty at play. So they believe this potentially, and just were trying to just find those reasons, right? You're not claiming an entailment of that they're being dishonest about it or something, right?
Yeah, there's certainly a percentage of the text that seems to be like they're just coping. They're not trying to lie.
Yeah.
They're just coping with the reality that Jesus is now dead.
It's like in like Luke, you get this talk about the kingdom of God being this spiritual thing, and that's not this like literal cosmic judgment that you get in Mark's kind of version with, you know, go read the first words of Jesus in what I think it's Mark chapter 115, right? So if you go look at that, it's very clear he's got this apocalyptic kind of message, and then you get, I don't think the author of Luke is like, oh, let me dishonestly try to like, you know, make this work. They took stock in what Jesus said and had to figure out kind of ways to reconcile that. So, you know, there's a chance that wasn't dishonest, but I just want to stress that point, because I think a lot of times people think like, oh, they just dishonestly were motivated. It's like, well, no, I think coping was a really good way to put that. Yeah.
And I think we see a lot of examples of this. Like if you study modern day cults, a lot of these cults had like what we would call the end, like where it should have fallen apart, like the David Koresh cult at the Waco siege. According to the teachings of David Koresh, that was the end. That was the time of the eschatological fulfillment. And so when he died, and when all of it, you know, his 70 of his followers died in the Waco siege, it was like 4 people, a couple people that survived, I forget how many. But when all that went down, that should have been the end of the cult. Unfortunately, there are still people alive today that believe in the teachings of David Koresh. They literally believe that he is the embodiment of the Messiah, even despite the fact that he predicted things that not only didn't come true, but they're contradicted by what happened. Because there are people that they get so emotionally invested that they're not willing to leave.
It will not rain today. It just starts pouring. Yes.
Yeah.
Buddy, what are we going to do here?
So I guess my main concern with Jesus is like what made him such a pop culture icon at the time that made multiple people follow him, not only follow him, but then write the Gospels after. Is it really, do you really think that it's just like them trying to find, like them being desperate to find a reason to like move past the old laws or things like that? Like, because it's just, I don't know. Like, I'm sure
it sounds like you're in your question though, you're assuming that like people would have just done this from whole cloth or something, right? Me and Justin aren't mythicists, so we think that Jesus likely existed, right? So if I'm picking up what you're saying, it sounds like you were kind of like, well, like going from the old to the new, why do they kind of, you know, what would motivate them? But I think there were real events that happened that people were convinced by, and then, you know, convincing pagans or other people that kind of already believe in this hierarchical system of deities, you know, you just kind of put Jesus at the top of them, you know, and go on your way. I mean, I know Justin probably could put more meat on the bone with that, but.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated situation. And the other thing too is I think we're assuming that like the following of Jesus after he died was like this big movement. The reality is it was probably a small movement for the first initial push until like the message that like the restructured message of Jesus could be made a little bit more palatable, then other people were willing to accept it. People who didn't know Jesus, they didn't know the disciples, they had no idea what would actually happen, but they enjoyed the philosophy of it. So for example, Justin Martyr, he wasn't a witness to anything, but Justin said that the philosophy of Christianity is better than any other philosophy. Like he was willing to accept it just on the virtue of its teachings, not as much as whether or not it is true, although he did believe that Jesus fulfilled prophecies, which is another problem for Justin Martyr because he was wrong. But so like there's a lot of Christians that just wanted to believe it. They liked it. It was one of many religions. They were willing to accept it because they already believed in all these other religions that they didn't have evidence for. This is just another one.
Look at people in the ancient aliens kind of stuff. Like they really want to believe that kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter what you say to those people. Like they are just going to believe like that, you know, we couldn't have had the technology for the pyramids and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, man, you have it in real time today, people wanting something to be true and working really hard at that belief.
Yeah. But listen, Dylan, we've got some people. And Dylan, we've got some people waiting to get in, and I think your microphone keeps getting quieter and quieter, and we can't actually hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I was like, I
unfortunately.
can't really hear him, but I don't know. I was like, hoping that's not on mine. Yeah, it's like a bug now. It's like a little fly. I got like Dylan the fly in my ear. It's like, okay, I'll see you. Bye.
But Dylan, thanks for chatting with us, and come back soon, okay?